Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. Welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, my weekly interview show where I get a chance to get a better grasp and understanding of somebody else's perspective on movies, and in this case, one movie in particular. And we are going to be talking about The Kid. And who am I going to be talking with? Rowan Wood. Rowan, thank you so much for coming on. As always, one of my most frequent collaborators here.
Of course, I'm honored to have gotten that title at this point.
Yep. And it's true. We're friends and we talk a lot of movies. And this time, before we jump into my little interview about Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, where can people find you?
I can be found primarily at thelenientcritic.com. That's LENIENT critic.com. Also on Twitter at Bits of Joel, spelled phonetically. And Shane and I have another podcast called Rowan and the Wasteland, where every week we talk about a film of one of our choosing and basically look at it with a larger perspective, casting a wider net over the realm of film and talking about some similar ones that you might enjoy. So just check that out. It's on all the it's on all the podcast places, and we
All of
very
them.
much enjoy doing it.
Absolutely all of them. Now, Rowan here is on for his first film interview. Gotten past the 3 episodes where I just came up with a bunch of questions generally about movies. And Rowan's going to be starting his curriculum on the silent film era. And here we are to talk about The Kid. Now, Rowan, what made you pick this particular film to be part of your curriculum?
Well, I first saw it earlier this year, I think in March, just because I was trying to broaden my horizons a bit,
Mhm.
in terms of like what movies I had seen. And I know my mom had told me that when I was younger, I was very resistant to watching black and white films and silent films and stuff. And I wanted to change that, just because actively change that, not just think about changing it or watch a couple. Like I wanted to watch as many as I can, and I'm still doing that. And I feel like the black and white barrier and the silent barrier are two big things that a lot of people
Mhm.
cannot get past. And so I think a lot of other people, just like me, could use their horizons broadened, even if they are not currently aware or actively seeking it out at this present moment. So I think that The Kid is definitely, it's one of my favorite silent films. That's ironically one of the categories we've talked about on Rowan in the Wasteland.
Yep.
But it's definitely one that is it's certainly one of the best. I feel like it's impossible to objectively rank a film or just look at a film, because you're always going to have some sort of little implicit bias, even if you're not aware of it. But I feel like The Kid is as close to perfect as a silent movie can be, just in terms of theme and composition and just absolute talent, both in front of and behind the camera, which a lot of the time with these silent movies was the same people.
There you go. Absolutely. It was a very interesting time for movie making. And if you want to learn more about it, go watch Babylon because nobody else is. Uh, which is bombing horribly at the
Mm.
box office right
I'm going
now.
to see it Thursday before it gets pulled.
There you go.
Yeah,
Well, here's the thing. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of movies coming out over like this coming weekend. So I don't
right.
know what's going to get pulled unless everybody's just like, well, nobody's seeing these movies. More Avatar
I was
screening.
about to say more screens for Avatar.
More screenings for Avatar.
Yeah.
Now, Roan, why do you feel like this is such a classic in this silent era of film?
Mhm. Well, I think first of all, it strikes the perfect balance of length. It's not too long and it's not too
Mhm.
short. Features around that time were like usually, I mean, I could say usually, but there was no real norm. There was movies like this that were about an hour. There was Buster Keaton's Sherlock Jr., which was 45 minutes. There's like much shorter, Méliès style shorts.
Yeah.
And then there's D.W. Griffith's 2+ hour Intolerance and Birth of a Nation, which was 3.5 hours. So there really was no norm at that point for how long a feature film should be. But I think The Kid is absolute. It's just perfectly paced for its length. It's about, depending on the version that you see, I know the HBO Max version is 53 minutes, which
Yeah.
I think is just absolutely perfect and just really, really solid, for the time, as well as solid even now when you're looking at silent films. Um, are you going to seek out one that's 2.5 hours that you know that you might have to watch in chunks, or are you going to watch something like this, The Kid, which is like just a little bit under an hour and just looks absolutely charming? Um, so there's that, and there's also just the absolute, I guess, as I just mentioned, the charm of this movie, because this isn't it's not necessarily explicitly about the issues that face society or something, or something of the like, um, but it is definitely about it's about experience, and the experiences that a lot of people do have, especially parents, and especially children. And I feel like a lot of viewpoints are represented here through these sort of archetypal characters that I know we're going to talk about in a little bit. Um, but yeah. Generally, there's just a lot here, of merit that I think it really deserves more attention and love. And I know, like, it's beloved in film circles and stuff like that. But I'm talking, I'm talking mainstream. I'm talking like the appeal that it should still have to this day, that it really doesn't, at least for casual film viewers.
Absolutely. And it's important, obviously, to talk about the man, the myth, the legend who created this all, Charlie Chaplin. Now, before you answer my question, which where do you feel like this lands amongst Charlie Chaplin's career? Just give the audience a little bit of perspective on your experience with, like, what Chaplin films have you seen, which ones are ones that you're hoping to check out.
Mhm. So I have not, like, all of this that I've watched is really within the last um year.
Mhm.
I have tried to watch as many Chaplin movies as I can. Um, I have I haven't seen a lot of his shorts. I know he did a lot of shorts, like A Day's Pleasure and A Dog's Life, and
Mhm.
those that I have not gotten to yet, despite them being very short. But I've seen a lot of his major movies. Not the Gold Rush, not the Circus, but this The Kid, Modern Times, City Lights. I think those are the big ones. I haven't seen The Great Dictator. The Great Dictator is another big one that I really want to get to. But despite the sort of limited amount that I've seen of him, I just think he's one of the most engaging silent film actors, because he knows what people are looking for and he knows how to give it to them, both as a writer, director, and actor, and a composer. He just tackles so many of these positions, both behind and in front of the camera, and he just does such an incredible job doing everything, that it makes sense as to why people like watching him then, and why people still like watching him now.
Absolutely. And where do you feel like this lands for you amongst the Chaplin films that you've watched so far?
Well, this is my favorite silent movie, and so I feel like by default that makes it my favorite Charlie Chaplin movie as well. Even though some films he did were not silent, or were technically not silent,
Mhm.
I think he all of his stuff is amazing, and is pretty much like undisputed in shows up on all of the top 100, top 250 lists. And it's, like, everything he does is beloved. So I don't think, at least from that I know, that there is a bad Charlie Chaplin feature film. But from what I've seen of this, Modern Times and City Lights, it's definitely at the top, although I think Modern Times and City Lights are both absolutely amazing in their own right.
Yeah, I think City Lights was one of the first ones I saw. I think the first one I actually saw was The Great Dictator, because
Mhm.
I watched that in film club in college.
Yeah.
And that was something else. I absolutely loved that film. Now, obviously Charlie Chaplin created this persona, this character that's one of the most iconic characters in all of cinema. But Rowan, what are your thoughts on the Tramp?
I love the Tramp, both as a character and as an idea.
Mhm.
As a character, just because he is the everyman, and he stands in. I guess I'm sort of jumping ahead to the idea part, but I think they're really intertwined, because he sort of stands in for all of these morals and ideals that we as people sort of like to believe that we have, and at the same time, he's sort of he embodies parts of ourselves that we may want to ignore, but the good that eventually like resurfaces. For example, in The Kid, when he first finds the child, he tries to pawn off the child several times.
Mhm.
But he eventually does keep the child, and then they and raises him, and and just he's evidently, I mean, at least as far as the kid is concerned, a great father, because they get along great and they have just like a great understanding. They do con jobs together.
Mhm.
And so the tramp in this instance, like, I know in each of his appearances the tramp stands in for like sort of like a different facet of humanity. In this, it's parenthood. In City Lights, it's sort of like trying to get in with the wealthy
Mhm.
and high society, and like the lengths that you'll go for love and all that. Um and in modern times, it's just struggling to survive in modern society, and with the industrialization of America and all that. And it's just every time he pops up in a new scenario, that you're going to perhaps not learn something, but observe something, and understand something new about how humanity works, because the tramp is just such a basic figure put into these situations that it's always interesting to see how he'll react, and how and what he'll do. But he's also hilarious, and Chaplin portrays him perfectly with his little
Mhm.
like with his little duck walk, and his, like, I don't know. Chaplin is, I think, a genius, and this character is his greatest creation.
Yeah, in my great performance on film class in college that I wound up taking, we went into a lot of detail about how specifically disheveled he looks.
Mhm.
His shoes are too big, his waistcoat is too small. There's just like all these little specific details that make him so odd and stand out.
Mhm.
And it's all for comedic purpose, and it's all genius, and it all comes together. And it's so interesting because Charlie Chaplin is so much different than the Tramp, because this is a very,
Yeah.
very intelligent and very creative person who is able to pull this all together. Now, Ron, what are some of the standout moments and highlights from this film for you?
Mhm. Probably the after so at the end of this movie, when it's a very happy ending. The kid gets to go with both his mom, with both his birth mother and the tramp, and they all live happily ever after. And after we finished watching it, my mom said, "This is like this is the worst movie to show an orphan or someone who's adopted, because it gives them such unrealistic expectations for like what could happen and what will never happen in 99.999% of the cases." Um, but so the ending is like just because of how sweet it is. The first time I watched it, it made me cry, just because it's just so absolutely adorable and poignant. um but I suppose the dream sequence in which everyone, sort of the yard in which the tramp's apartment is sort of in like the embodiment of heaven, and people have either angel wings or devil horns, depending on what their role in the story is. And that, just going back to my point about like the idea that the tramp stands for, this dream sequence boils it down even further, and even more basic, as just completely good, bad, right, wrong. Sometimes they are as easy to see as that. And especially in such a raw scenario as what happens with the kid, it's very easy to take a moral side, because it's just so obvious what this movie wants you to go for in that scenario.
Absolutely. This has a lot of fun moments, and that one
Yeah.
definitely was a very creative one.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of Chaplin's films, it's a lot of comedy, obviously. It's a lot of poking fun at things about society. But what makes this particular film stand out emotionally for Chaplin and his filmography?
Mhm. I think it really just boils down to the kid himself, because he's the title character, and he is the
Mm.
emotional center of the movie. He is the motivator for pretty much every single character's actions, other characters' actions rather, in this film. Um, and I really think it is it's the kid character that that makes everything stand out and makes this different from his other films. Because yes, in his other movies he is making a different point about humanity, but this I feel like is the most poignant and the sweetest and the most um and just the best, I think, and appealing to some of humanity's most basic nature, in terms of like instinct and parenthood in general. Like I know not everyone has, the maternal instinct or the paternal instinct, but I'm sure if a lot of people that say that they weren't were put into a somewhat similar situation, I'm sure that they might change their tune, or they might do something else. And honestly, there's really no way that we would know for most people. But I just think it's interesting that the archetypal character of the tramp is put into this situation, and so we see how he might react, which is how a lot of people might react as well.
Absolutely. And I do think it really is that relationship and that dynamic at the core of this that really makes us stand out emotionally. Because I'm trying to think, because like City Lights has, someone has a like that love story in it.
Mhm.
And The Great Dictator ends on something very emotional and very powerful, but it's different. It's like a
Right.
call against Hitler, and
Yeah.
so like that's a whole other level. But like I do feel like this gets really down on like that personal human level.
Right.
Now, this is a one of the features of Chaplin's that was pretty early on in his career. What do you think? What about this film do you feel like made it something that Chaplin could springboard off of and really jumpstart his career making feature films?
Mhm. Well, I think his earlier work was more proving that he could do it and that people did
Mhm.
enjoy watching him. And the fact that he put an absolutely adorable kid in Jackie Coogan in this movie probably helped his case a lot. Jackie Coogan actually co-starred in I think it was A Day's Pleasure in 1919 as well, when he was 4 years old, maybe, like 4 or 5. So there's definitely a lot of like I mean, not a lot of history, but some history with them, and they together so well.
Mhm.
And Chaplin, he had to do a lot with these first couple films. He had to establish the character of Tramp. He had to, like make a name for himself as well, not just the Tramp, but Charlie Chaplin as well. And I think this movie is sort of the biggest example that really worked and connected with audiences. And uh, I don't know. I just would have loved to see this with an audience in like any of Chaplin's movies. Would have loved to see it with an audience when it first came out, just to see what people thought of it then.
Yeah.
Because like I'm sure there were people that hated him, that were annoyed by the Tramp, that were like pissed off about some stuff that happened in this movie. But I just want to see it, and I just want to hear it, and I just want to experience what people thought of it at the time, because history does not necessarily, like history and records do not necessarily reflect every like every viewpoint of what
Mhm.
was, and only what this film is very well looked upon. So I can imagine most of what we are going to find about it is extremely positive. So yeah, I guess I'm just interested in seeing uh how this was how this was really received, and what was on the path to make it a classic, aside from just Chaplin. And yeah, aside from just Chaplin, because his name is what is most commonly associated with this, obviously. So yeah.
Absolutely. And this is a nice segue as you brought up in the past couple of questions, this, the titular kid. So, what are
Right.
your thoughts on this performance by this young actor and how this character really fits into this film and holds their own because, it's Charlie Chaplin that they're acting against?
Right. Exactly. I think Jackie Coogan is perfect. And I actually did a lot of research after I rewatched this movie
Mhm.
yesterday on him. He was raised in a family of performers, so he could dance and he could do, and he had a lot of skills by the time that Chaplin discovered him. Um, and I think he is like, this is probably one of the best child performances I've ever seen ever. And this
Mhm.
was like over 100 years ago. And he is so magnetic and cute, and like he knows, like he can hold his own against adult performers too. Um, And yeah, I don't know, just whenever he's interacting with the tramp, especially, he is like it just seems so wholesome and so pure, and so genuine, because he did have sort of like a father son relationship with Chaplin as well. And some fun facts: Jackie Coogan is pretty much the reason why we have modern child labor laws in Hollywood. Um, and unlike a lot of child actors, he did not he did get less popular as he got older, but he was Uncle Fester in the 1960s Addams Family show, and he did have a career up until he died in the 80s. So he is like he did. um I wouldn't say that like that he coasted off of his success, but he did keep trying, and he did, and like this is just such a great start for him. I think he's absolutely incredible, and he's probably one of the main reasons why I love rewatching this movie, because it just shows what child actors like can do, and
Yeah.
their potential. And obviously I'm not going to hold everyone to this standard, but this is the gold standard for me, if I'm being completely honest.
You just blew my mind about him being Uncle Fester.
Yeah. I didn't know that until yesterday.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Now, I always like to end these interviews with a very specific question on why these films hold up. And Rowan, why do you feel like this film, what, 100 years later,
Mhm.
still holds up, and we have people like yourself and like myself watching this for the first time in 2022?
I think aside from just the fact that it's a Chaplin movie,
Yep.
I think that is a really big one. Um, but again, I think that this is my favorite of his, and I think it's his best. So I got to back that up somehow, right? I think that he is just the fact that everything about this movie really works and lands. I think the emotion lands right when it's supposed to. The comedy, I think, is absolutely stellar, and that requires commitment from everyone, like everyone involved. Chaplin, especially, just because he's wearing so many hats with this production and with most of his productions. Um, and I think everything really works here in a way that, I love all of his other movies. I don't think City Lights works nearly as much as some of his other ones. I still think it's absolutely incredible, but I think it's not as lucid with its story threads and its themes as well as some of the other ones are. And I think The Kid is just it's just so you don't even have to watch the movie. Just look at the poster. You can tell me exactly what this movie is saying. You can tell me exactly what the relationship between the main characters are. You could probably even guess the plot. But
Yeah.
that is not the point of the movie. Point is, the point is, parenthood is tricky, but it's rewarding, even if it's not exactly what you expected. In the
Mhm.
tramp's case, it's definitely not what he expected, because he never expected anything to happen
Nope.
in the first place. And one day he's just saddled with a child. And so, but he after he brought the child back to his apartment, he probably could have just brought the child back out the next day, left it on a street corner, but he didn't. He stayed with the child.
Yep.
He kept the kid, because he grew to love him, and he got attached to him. Um, and yeah, I think that's is why for me this movie holds up, and why it's still one of my all-time favorites, and I'm going to be rewatching it for a long time.
There you go. And
Yeah.
you heard it from Rowan. Go check this movie out. And he said
Yeah.
earlier, this is on HBO Max. That's where I watched it.
And the
And
Criterion Channel, if you do have it.
yes, the Criterion Channel, and I
Yeah.
went right on to put it on my watch list, to get list on
Yeah.
Amazon, so to add it to my collection. But Rowan, thank you so much for coming on and talking about The Kid and sharing your thoughts on a film that you care about.
Of course. Thank you for having me, as always.
Absolutely. And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.